2 summers ago, 3 of us decided to go totally off-grid for a week-long camping trip deep in Montana wilderness. No phones, no GPS, no distractions. Just nature, hiking, and a rundown forest cabin that someone from my girlfriend's work owned. It sounded perfect. It was me, my girlfriend Jordan, and our mutual friend Nate. We were all from the city, Portland, and none of us were exactly wilderness experts, but we were confident. We packed our gear, food, flashlights, radios, even flares. The cabin was supposed to be 10 miles from the nearest ranger station, with a creek, a wood-burning stove, and a view of the mountains. But what we didn't know was that people never stayed there twice. Jordan's co-worker who offered the cabin had almost laughed when we agreed to take it. He called it Whistler's Cabin, though he never explained why. Getting there was harder than we expected. The trail was unmarked and the GPS went dead halfway in. We used a hand-drawn map and we still got lost twice. By the time we arrived, the sun was dripping behind the pines, casting long shadows through the trees. The cabin looked like it had been dragged out of a horror movie. It was one story, weather-worn planks, a single broken window patched with duct tape, and a sagging roof held together by rusted nails. A pile of chopped firewood sat outside, damp but usable. There was no lock on the front door, just a rusted hook latch and a handle that stuck when you turned it. Inside was better. It was dusty, but not disgusting. There were 2 cots, a fireplace, an old table, shelves stocked with canned beans and off-brand bottled water, and a metal locker full of hiking gear. We unpacked, started a fire, and made instant noodles over the stove. That night, we played cards by flashlight and laughed about how creepy the place felt. Nate joked that we were going to be murdered by a squirrel or something. But when we finally turned in and the fire crackled down to coals, I couldn't sleep. Because somewhere outside, in the dark woods, something was whistling. It wasn't a tune, it wasn't birds. It was just 2 long, drawn-out tones. Then silence, then again, and again. I figured maybe an owl or wind whistling through trees, but it sounded too deliberate, like it was mimicking something. I didn't say anything that night. I just closed my eyes and willed myself to sleep. The next day, I mentioned it over breakfast. Jordan frowned. "I heard it too," she said. "I thought you were messing around." Nate hadn't heard anything. He slept like the dead. We brushed it off, went hiking, we found a lake, swam a little, took photos, normal stuff. But when we got back to the cabin around dusk, something was off. There was 3 deep gouges in the door frame, like something had scratched at it. Not woodpecker holes or weather damage, actual claw marks. Fresh, splinters still hanging. Nate said it was probably a bear and made jokes again, but I saw the way Jordan kept glancing over her shoulder that night, and I know she saw me doing it too. That night, it whistled again, only this time, it was closer. We all heard it. Nate sat up in his cot, face pale. Jordan turned off the flashlight. "Do you hear that?" We nodded. Then something knocked on the wall of the cabin 3 times. Not hard, but solid. Not animal noise. It was like a knuckle, like a hand. I grabbed the flare gun and moved towards the door. Silence. I yanked it open. Nothing. Just cold air and thick, choking darkness between the trees. Then came from behind the cabin. We stayed up until sunrise. The third morning, we went outside and we found footprints in the dirt around the cabin. Not boots, bare foot. But they were wrong. The toes were elongated, too many of them, and they led in a circle around the cabin, over and over, dozens of loops. We considered hiking back, but Jordan's legs were still sore from the trail in, and we didn't want to leave in the middle of the night if something was stalking us. Nate, ever the skeptic, joked again, "It's probably some weird forest hermit trying to scare us off." But then, Jordan showed us what she found behind the cabin. Pinned to the back wall, using a small rusted knife, was a scrap of paper. Yellowed, damp, it said, "Don't speak to it, don't mimic it, don't whistle back." We packed our gear and agreed to leave first thing in the morning. That night, it changed. We were half asleep when the cabin went dead quiet. No wind, no bugs, no creaking wood. Then came the whistle. Only this time, it wasn't from outside. It came from inside the cabin. Jordan bolted up. "Who did that?" Nate turned on the flashlight. "It wasn't me." The sound came again. Not just from one place, from all around us, like the walls were breathing it. Then we heard the door open. Not swing or slam, just unlatch. Slowly, hinges groaning. I aimed the flare gun at the entrance, but there was nothing there. And then the thing crawled through the fireplace. It was long, too long, pale and wet looking, like something had shredded its skin and wore it as a suit. It didn't walk, it folded forward, limbs cracking. Its face, oh, if you could call it that, was smooth and flat, with no mouth, just a caved in area where a nose should have been. But it whistled anyway, somehow. And when Jordan screamed, it tilted its head like a curious child and whistled her exact scream back at her. I fired the flare gun, the whole cabin lit up red, and the thing streaked, not with a mouth, but from everywhere, and lunged backwards into the shadows. We didn't wait, we ran. We didn't take the supplies, we didn't care, we just ran. Nate sprained his ankle on the way down the trail, and I dragged him while Jordan kept scanning the trees. The sun broke over the hills as we reached the dirt road where we parked, but our car, covered in claw marks, windows smashed. We hitchhiked to the nearest ranger station. They said they'll send someone to the cabin. They didn't. The ranger just looked at us and asked, "Did you hear it whistling?" We never went back. None of us talked much anymore. Jordan moved to the East Coast. Nate stopped replying to messages, but sometimes, late at night, I hear it, just outside my window. Not a voice, not a knock, just a whistle. And sometimes, I think it's waiting. Not to hurt me, but to see if I'll whistle back. The trail was supposed to loop, but by the second day, our compass was spinning, our map was useless, and something was leaving stones outside our tent. This happened to me and my cousin Lee 2 years ago in northern Idaho. We planned a 4-day backpacking loop through Salway Bitterroot Wilderness, a remote, dense stretch of mountains, lakes and forests with almost no cell reception. We were both in decent shape, familiar with hiking and eager for solitude. The trail was marked moderate, with a clear loop that would take us about 36 miles, ending back at our parked car near the ranger station. We brought everything we needed: GPS, maps, compasses, water filters, even a satellite phone in case of emergency. I had planned every stop. Our second night was supposed to be beside a glacier lake. The day we started, the weather was perfect. Sky clear, no wind, we made great time. We camped near a creek the first night, slept like rocks, but it all went wrong the next morning. We started hiking at 7 AM. The trail, which had been well worn and easy to follow the first day, grew thinner, more overgrown. The trees pressed in tighter and our pace slowed. Eventually, the dirt path narrowed into a game trail and then nothing, just forest. But my GPS said we were en route, so we pushed ahead, trusting the digital guidance, figuring we'll reconnect with the loop soon. By 5 PM, we were nowhere near where we were supposed to be. The lake, gone. Elevation, wrong. Trees all looked the same, too symmetrical, like someone had arranged them. The GPS had begun to drift, showing us spinning in place or moving backwards, and the compass spinning, slowly, lazily. We camped in a tight clearing surrounded by tall cedar trees, and we were behind schedule, but not panicked, until we found the stones, arranged in a perfect ring around the tent. 8 smooth river stones. We hadn't been near water in hours, but each stone placed exactly 3 feet apart, like a boundary. Neither of us had done it, and we hadn't heard a thing all night. The next day, things got worse. We tried to backtrack, following our original GPS breadcrumbs, but nothing looked familiar. Trees had different bark, trail markers we remembered passing were gone. Lee started to freak out. "Dude, this isn't just getting lost, something's screwing with us." We both tried the satellite phone. No signal. We turned around again and tried to descend, hoping to reach lower ground or running water. We hiked for 8 hours and got nowhere. The forest shifted, paths that should have been downhill sloped up. The shadows stayed long, like the sun had stopped moving. We marked trees with our camping knife, deep notches, 3 slashes in a triangle. 3 hours later, we passed one of the same marked trees, but it was facing the other direction. That night, we camped under a rock overhang and kept a fire going. Around midnight, I woke up. The fire was still burning, Lee was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, and his boots were still beside it. I called for him, quiet at first, and then louder. Nothing. I grabbed the flashlight and I started scanning the woods. That's when I saw the clearing. A perfectly round, grassless circle, maybe 20 feet across, with a single, smooth boulder in the center. Lee was sitting on it, but his back was turned and he wasn't moving, just sitting, staring into the trees. I approached slowly. "Lee," I said. He didn't answer, and when I got within 10 feet, I saw his eyes were open wide, but his pupils were huge, nearly blacked out. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. I reached for him, and his hand shot out, grabbed my wrist, and whispered, "It's listening." I dragged him back to camp. He was semi-conscious, mumbling nonsense, repeating phrases like "rootless roots" and "the sky's wrong." He collapsed inside the tent and he didn't move for hours. I stayed up, knife in hand, flashlight in the other. At some point, I heard crunching leaves. I turned the light, and there, just beyond the tree line, stood a figure. It looked like a hiker at first, a backpack, jacket, boots, but something was off. The limbs were too long, and it didn't blink, just stood completely still, watching. I called out. It didn't move. Then it tilted its head slowly, but too far, until it looked like its neck had snapped, and it stepped behind a tree. I waited, breath held. It didn't reappear, but a second figure stepped out on the other side of the camp, identical. Same gear, same head tilt. It was mimicking a person, but it didn't understand how people move. I grabbed Lee, still half delirious, and we bolted. We didn't pack up, we didn't care. We ran until our legs gave out. We slept under a fallen tree, and at dawn we kept moving. Eventually, we hit a stream, fresh water. We followed it for what felt like hours. Then we heard it, a motor, a Ranger ATV cutting through a fire trail. We stumbled out of the woods like crash survivors. They took us back to the station, gave us water, food, and checked for injuries. When we explained what happened, the ranger just stared, and he finally said, "That trail loop, we closed it 4 years ago. Flash flooding wiped out half the route. GPS doesn't work out there anymore." He paused. "How long were you out there?" I said, 3 days. He looked at his clipboard. "You've been missing for 9. Lee was never the same. He doesn't talk about it, doesn't go outside much. He moved back in with his parents. Sometimes I catch him, just staring at nothing, whispering under his breath. He still draws the stone circle in notebooks over and over. And as for me, I still hike, but never alone, never off grid, and I don't trust compasses anymore. Because somewhere out there, deep in the trees, the paths aren't for us. They don't loop, they trap, they listen, and if you walk far enough into the wrong trail, something might follow you back out. We thought we were alone in the mountains, but something watched us from the tree line every night until it stepped closer. This happened 5 years ago when I joined a university-led ecological trip deep into the Pacific Northwest wilderness. I was 21, a biology major, and eager to get field experience. The trip was part of a forest conservation study. Our small group, 3 students and 2 professors, were assigned to a remote valley in the Olympic Mountains, accessible only by boat and a 12-mile hike. We'd be out there for 7 days, logging tree growth, tracking animal activity, and collecting environmental data. No phones, no roads, just the wild. The rangers dropped us a small trailhead with our gear, radios, and a weather report that warned of fog, but no storms. We hiked in and set up base camp in a clearing surrounded by massive evergreens. The silence was profound. No hum of traffic, no distant airplanes, just wind, branches, and an occasional distant call of an elk. But by the 3rd night, we realized something else was out there, something watching us. The first sign was subtle. On our 2nd morning, Professor Keegan noticed that one of the field notebooks he'd left on a camp chair was soaked, but there'd been no rain and nothing else was wet. He thought maybe it had been dragged near the river by raccoons, but there were no footprints. The notebook had been returned to the exact same place, but just dripping wet and open to a blank page. The next day, our food stash, secured in a rope-hung bear bag, was found lowered gently to the ground, unzipped, with half of it missing. Not torn open, unzipped. We blamed other campers, though we hadn't seen anyone. That night, while we were huddled around the fire, one of the grad students, Tyler, froze mid-sentence. "Is someone standing over there?" We followed his gaze, and at the edge of the clearing, between 2 towering fir trees, stood a dark figure. No flashlight, no movement, just standing, facing us. By the time we grabbed our own lights, it was gone. From that night on, none of us slept well. We'd hear movement in the bushes, twigs snapping rhythmically, not scurrying like raccoons, but deliberate pacing. Every morning would find something altered. One morning, someone's boots were missing, found later in a tree 20 feet off the ground. Another time, our tents were zipped open while we slept. Nothing stolen, just unzipped. Professor Keegan tried to keep things calm. He insisted it was pranksters, people messing with us, maybe rival students. But Professor Reeves wasn't so sure. She pulled me to a side on the 5th night. "This isn't random, it's behaviour, purposeful, it's like it's studying us." That same evening, fog rolled in earlier than expected. Dense, blinding. You could only see 10 feet ahead. We lit lanterns and gathered close, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Then we noticed something. The fog had formed a perfect circle around the clearing, but wouldn't cross into it. It pressed against the trees like a wall, swirled, moved, but never entered. And standing in that wall of fog in 4 different directions were shapes. Tall, thin, unmoving. Not animals, not people, just there. None of us spoke, none of us moved. The fire crackled between us, suddenly loud in the silence. Then from the trees, "Mimic!" A voice, but not a human one, not really. It sounded like a throat struggling to imitate a human tone, like someone had learned to speak by listening. Professor Keegan grabbed a flare gun and fired it into the tree line. The flare illuminated a shape, 7 feet tall, limbs too long, skin the colour of rot, no eyes, just holes where a nose might be, and a mouth split wide into a black, sunken grin. It didn't flinch, it just stepped backwards, melting into the fog. Professor Reeves screamed for us to run. We grabbed the radio, maps, and a few essentials and fled into the dark, foggy woods. The problem? No direction made sense. The compass spun, the GPS blinked uselessly. Hearing footsteps beside us, but never seeing anything. Then we found the cabin. It wasn't on any map. A single-story wooden structure with a peaked roof and a boarded-up front window. It looked abandoned. No lights, no sign of recent use. Professor Reeves wanted to avoid it, but Professor Keegan, now limping from a twisted ankle, insisted we needed shelter. We entered. Inside were 5 chairs around a table, 5 cots, 5 lanterns, everything covered in dust. But on the wall, etched in charcoal, was a message. It mimics, it replaces, it waits. No one spoke. We just sealed the doors and sat in silence. Then we heard it. Footsteps on the roof, followed by our own voices, calling to us from the woods, begging to be let in. We stayed awake until morning. When we opened the door, the fog had lifted, but the trail back, gone. It took us 2 more days of aimless wandering before a search team finally found us, led by a ranger who looked at the cabin photo I took and said, "That's impossible. That cabin burned down in '97. No one's rebuilt it." They took us back by chopper. We were treated for exposure, dehydration and stress, but no one believed the rest. 3 months later, Tyler disappeared. He told friends he was going back to the woods. His tent was found on a ridge in the Olympic range. No sign of him. But the rescue team did find something strange. His voice, captured on a field recorder, saying, "Please don't let it wear me."